probably the target audience would be 4th and 5th grade, although it goes a little below and a little above that. And then, you know, so what I want to really say about this is that it was inspired by the stories I heard from my mother's girlhood about growing up during the Depression on a farm in Wisconsin. And not just one farm, but actually several. They moved back and forth from Chicago to the farm, back to Chicago, back to the farm, several times over the course of those 10 years that made or at least 7 years or so that were the worst of the Depression, which started, as most of you I'm sure probably know, with the stock market crash of October 29th of 1929, which was caused by a variety of things kind of coming together in a perfect storm sort of way. There was the stock market crash, followed by then the banks failing, businesses failing, people losing all of their savings and their jobs, because as the businesses failed, they did the same thing that many businesses did in 2008, which is they cut their expenses by cutting their employees or cutting wages or whatever they could do to try to stay in business a little longer. And so the people who lost out big time, of course, were the people on the bottom. And this is a story about, as I said, it was inspired by my mother's life, but it is not, it is fiction, okay? And it's kind of built around the notion of something that always kind of puzzled me, and which was that my mother was this very, very outgoing, affectionate, huggy, kissy, I love you, mom, all right? My grandmother, my mother's mother, was not. She wasn't even that kind of a grandmother. She was not unkind, but she was much more aloof. She was definitely old country versus new country. So that was where the centerpiece of this story, which is the relationship between a girl and her mother, that was where the story originated. And it kind of circles around the idea that Esther, it feels like, I mean, it doesn't seem to bother her little brother or her older sister that her mother never gives hugs or kisses, but it does bother her. And she really is craving this kind of display of affection. And she's thinking, how can I know that she even loves me if she won't say the words or she won't show me? So she decides, because she's not only, well, we won't say she's stubborn, but she's determined. And she decides that she is going to make her mother show her that she loves her. And she's just going to be so good, and she's going to work so hard, and she's going to help so much. Okay. Now, the worst thing they could have possibly imagined happens, and that is that the father loses his job. And suddenly, she's been looking around her at all these other people whose possessions are being piled on the street as they're evicted from their apartments, and people moving out of their apartment and moving in with someone else because they can't afford it. They're moving with family, they're moving to other towns. She sees her classmates disappearing, and she suddenly realizes that she'd all along been thinking, well, these terrible things are happening to other people, but they would never happen to her. And indeed, now they have. So she's frightened at first. She's thinking of what's going to happen to them, but then her mother and father announced that they're going to buy a farm. And because they've been saving up to maybe get a home in the city, but now they're going to use this toward a farm, and that way they can make their own living. They don't have to be dependent on someone else. So this is what causes their move to southern Wisconsin, not far outside of Milwaukee, actually. And I follow a year in Esther's life, the year that she's 10, and show how this city girl becomes a country girl and comes to love this life in the country, but also how they're impacted even on the farm by what's going on in the economy. And of course, we all know that any time, farmers are always at the mercy of the weather, and then there's just, you know, poorer crops or a bumper crop of something which sends the prices down. So even though it's not the greatest weather season for growing, but you know, it comes along, the prices aren't all that great when it comes time to sell. So they kind of limp into winter, and then things really, really get rough.